world domination plan map over here. 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We are here with our second part episode with Hank Preston, a advocate for DevNet. So thanks for joining us, and let's hop into it. We mentioned infrastructure as code and Terraform and some of these other tools. Everybody loves to talk about them, you know, how helpful they are and amazing they are. My question for you is, tell me one bad thing. Tell me one thing you dislike about infrastructure as code.
Most people agree that in order to automate something, you have to understand it. Would you both agree?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So to dive into automation, you have to understand it. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish. You need to be able to build it, build those automation scripts.
I would relate that to going back to Java, using something like Hibernate without knowing how to write a SQL query, right? You know, I mean, you have to respect the underlying technology in order to know how to take a shortcut around that.
Yeah.
The shortcomings of it.
Exactly. Here's the thing that I've been starting to think about is once you've moved into infrastructure as code and you've automated things, I'm starting to see that we're forgetting what we knew before because we don't need to know it as well anymore. We've automated it. I've put it in a corner. Now I can go move on to other things. And even in my own life, I'm working on a project now where I'm going back to something that has worked really well for the last 18 months without an issue. But we've got to do some updates and pieces to it. And I'm like, I don't remember how any of this worked. I wrote the code. I set up the process, but I haven't had to touch it in so long that I've like forgotten those details.
That reminded me when I was doing my studies around CCIE, and I was with Narvik Kocharian in one of his boot camps in London. And you used to expect on CCIE level, hitting all the time, deep dive things. And suddenly Narvik was dropping down to CCNA question, to the basics. And he always said, you need to go up and down. You cannot forget the foundations of all this, because then you will struggle with what you want to achieve. It was Absolutely. A very, very good lesson. Huh?
One of the things that bothers me a little bit about infrastructure as code is I think we're seeing a lot of options that have solutions for various cloud providers. Mm-hmm. What I would like to see is a standardized language, basically. I would love to see them become more generic, more abstracted, rather than as specialized as they are, because at that point, what's the difference between the SDK and the CLI if I'm just writing a script that I need to know every single specific for that provider? I guess granted, there are differences provider to provider. And at that level, you have to be so specialized. Like you said, when you come back to it 6 months later, you forget everything about that. And especially if you work with multiple vendors, now you need to know everything about every vendor and their specific implementation of it. So I think I'm interested in to see 2.0 of infrastructure as code, you know, kind of like back in the day, we went from, you know, to web 2.0. I'm interested to see where we go next with this technology.
Go and build a wrapper, put an overlay on top of that.
Right, but then now we're wrapping wrappers that wrap SDKs, right? What level have we gone too far?
I mean, it's a valid point, and it's one we see all over the place. But I think with every layer of wrapper abstraction, as we start to drive towards those standardized pieces, what you end up running across is this drive towards the least common denominator or the limited factor of what's there, and it means that the differentiation becomes harder to go through. And this isn't a unique problem to infrastructure as code. I mean, we see this in routing protocols, right? There's standards for routing protocols, and then every vendor adds extra pieces to differentiate for their customers.
Right. That's what SQL is, basically. Yeah, there's a standard, but everybody has their specific implementation on top of that.
I think we'll find some place in the middle. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where it's that generic. Otherwise, every company that builds clouds, it's like, what's the point for them? How do I compete if everybody does the exact same thing? Like, there's always going to be things that make one technology provider solution better than others. And if you want that standard, go leverage one of the infrastructure as code tools that do provide that limited, like least capable feature set, and you just write to those, whether it's Terraform or an Ansible role or something else.
I want to get to Hank sessions, because usually Hank has done a lot of DevNet teaching people how to automate things. But I've been always curious that you include a cartoon character called Carl.
Sure.
Where the story comes from, Carl? I've always been like,
yeah,
where he took this?
Carl's been an interesting character over the last several years. So I can't take credit for creating him. A good friend of mine who is the creator, his name is Roger Ian Dickinson. He's a Cisco solutions architect in the cloud space out of UK and Ireland. And I met up with him at a Cisco event and I said, this is great. And so we started to team up on different cloud strategy pieces. And so the start of it was actually Captain Cloud. You can probably see him over my shoulder. I've got a stuffed Captain Cloud way back there. And originally it was like a cloud story. It's like we're trying to just evolve, and he built up a team of different ways to explain it. And then as network automation started to grow, we hit an inflection point, and the decision is Roger was trying to figure out what to do to keep both stories go. And he decided to make Captain Cloud actually a twin, and Carl is Captain Cloud's twin, who is the more infrastructure focused brother. And I've had really good success using that idea to relate to folks like me, like you, like Carl, that are seeing themselves having to do that in their journey. And so that's where he came from. Roger gets all the credit for the artwork. I've just been blessed enough to have the chance to let him let me use all of his great materials.
It was pretty cool, huh? Last time when we saw each other, it was in Cisco headquarters. And I found him that he was moving racks from one location to another building because he was going to build the next, I think it was the next DevNet sandbox, the new space. You automate everything, but what's the process when you get from there to build the new stuff on the other side?
Oh man, that's a tough one, because building an infrastructure data center, there's all sorts of things that you just can't automate. I've yet to figure out how to automate like power cable connections and rack and stack. And so the general story, and because I talk about this transition and this project we did to add a new data center for DevNet Sandbox a lot, and I talk about how we went from approval for the project to running production workloads out of the data center in 6 months. And that was the time it took us. We didn't get access to the data center itself until about 3 months through it. And then we had 3 months from when they gave us the keys to rack and stack, power cable, asset tag, test all our links, get all the hardware right, get applications running onto the infrastructure, and then service clients. And automation was how we did that successfully, because we had to, in the 3 months where we didn't have access to the gear, we simulated our entire data center network and application systems using simulation tools. And that's what we built all of our infrastructure deployment and as code scripting against. And so when I got to the point in the cage where we could power stuff on and start sending configurations to it, I think it was 4 hours from when we had all of the management access to everything before we had the entire network deployed and we could start laying software onto pieces. It was about 3.5, 4 hours. We couldn't have done that without automation. So
nice.
That's very cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, we're forgetting the last one. We're going to give this wonderful book to someone in our audience that answers correctly one of Hank's questions.
All right, let's go. I would like to know, we'll go, because it's a model-driven programmability book, right? It's based on Yang that's out there. But so we've got NetConf and we've got RESTConf. And I want to see 4 good reasons that somebody would continue to use NetConf rather than the default answer of RESTConf is better because it's REST APIs and I don't need to use XML. I think that there are great reasons for NetConf and to stick with that. I'm curious what the audience can come up with. I want to see 4 solid technical reasons why NetConf is a good solution for problems.
That's a good question, and I want to wholeheartedly assure you, Hank, that I will not be winning that book. Everybody put your answers in, and we will have Hank pick the winner, and Guillermo will work on getting that prize out to the winner. So thank you again, Hank, for joining us. It's been a great pleasure. I hope you are staying warm and dry and safe up there in northern Ohio. Say hi to Lake Erie for me. I haven't seen it in quite a while, but thank you again for joining us. It's been great, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers.